wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football.
Hey Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. We're back from the bye, previewing the Las Vegas Raider game in Seattle this coming Sunday. Welcome into the show, Keith.
Yeah, important game for Seattle. They dropped one I don't think they should have against Tampa. Then they had the bye week. They've watched their game and a half lead over San Francisco evaporate, and now they're playing a bad team, or at least a team with a bad record, and they need to come in and reassert themselves, get this win, and so it's an important game for Seattle.
It's very important. We did a not a preview, but we did a look at the playoffs a couple of shows ago, and at that time, before the San Francisco 49ers played the Cardinals, Seattle was the 3rd seed. By the time that game ended, we were the 7th seed because of the tiebreaker. So San Francisco is up at the top of the division with the tiebreaker. We're now the 7th seed. We're very close. You know, Seattle drops a couple of iffy games. All of a sudden, Seattle's not in playoff contention anymore. Seattle needs to keep winning. We've talked about that a few different times. The upcoming schedule is somewhat favorable to Seattle to go out and get these next 3 games. They need to play the way that they played prior to that Tampa game. You'd mentioned that. Seahawks go and face here at home under head coach Josh McDaniels. Seahawks are 6-4. The Raiders come in at 3-7. Their only wins 2 games against Denver, 1 against Houston. Those teams have proven to be bottom 5 teams in the NFL, but it doesn't mean that the Raiders haven't played well. They've had some close games, losing by 1 point to Kansas City earlier, played the Chargers tough, etc. So at this point, the Raiders are kind of looking at their younger players and evaluating roster while the Seahawks are really trying to get into the playoffs. What do you expect from Seattle in this game? They had some time off, and they've had this bye week. Pete Carroll is a masterful coach in these situations, gets his teams ready to play, especially as they get closer to December. Do you expect the same?
I absolutely do. I mean, the coaches had an extra week to prep for this. They had a week to typically bye weeks, when you do a lot of self-scouting, you go back and rewatch yourself and figure out what you're doing well, what you're not doing well, what changes you can make to improve your team based on your players. And so that's part of why Pete Carroll gets more out of his team after his bye weeks, is because he does a lot of self-scouting then. And it's also a chance for the players to just get healthier. The wear and tear of a season, it's, even just the non-injured players, everyone's sore, everyone's bruised, everyone's battered. And to have a week where you're not doing that and you're just healing and you're fresh and ready to go, it matters quite a bit. And for the Seahawks to be in a position where they're, ready for a playoff run, and then also get a bye week this late in the season, puts them in good position, because they're going to be healthier and fresher than most of the teams that they play for the next couple of weeks. And these are games they have to win.
Absolutely. All right. So before we get too far ahead on strategy and what the Seahawks need to do by themselves, let's get into some matchups. Let's talk about Davante Adams, player that they picked up. The last 3 games, he's really picked up his game, 26 receptions, 413 yards, 5 touchdowns. He had 7, 141, and 2 versus Denver. And the Seahawks come in with the 21st ranked pass defense. So to me, that's one of the possible advantages that Las Vegas will look to exploit. Although Seattle's been playing better as of late, Tariq Woolen's had his latest pick in the last game. He comes in ready to take a stand against one of the better wide receivers in the NFL.
Yeah, Davante Adams is top 3 receiver in the NFL. I mean, the guy's just amazing. Hurt earlier in the year, still limited in practice, but playing. And he's gonna. I mean, with the other guys injured, all the weapons and stuff that Vegas is missing. I was going to say Oakland. That Vegas is missing. He is what they've got going in terms of the passing game, and so they're a team that they're going to force the ball into him. They're going to lean on their best offensive player, and it's going to be a tall order. But Tariq Woolen and Diggs and maybe some Ryan Neal, like those 3 are going to end up double teaming Davante Adams quite a bit. They've got to win. They've got to limit him. I mean, we've watched Tariq Woolen do that to other top receivers in the league, where sure they had 6 receptions, but it was for like 38 yards, like Sutton and some of the other ones. So if they can do that against Davante Adams, that's a win. And if
absolutely,
I don't see Arizona scoring much if they can keep Davante Adams' yards down, because they're not getting a lot of offense from anyone else.
Not Arizona, Las Vegas.
Did I say Arizona?
You did.
Well, I was in my head. We started off talking about San Francisco, and I'm like, if we're going to mention that again, like national media is like all over San Francisco right now. Like, oh my God, they're like Super Bowl, whatever. I'm like, they get a bad team with a backup quarterback. Can we calm down a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
but
Seattle played the Cardinals just as well, just as good. So speaking of
players.
Speaking of Arizona, an old Arizona player, Chandler Jones, the defensive end, is not the old Chandler Jones we're familiar with. This year he's been really struggling. Half a sack. They signed him to a 3-year, $51 million deal. They expect more out of him. He just hasn't been there for them. Max Crosby is their guy. He's been the guy that everyone needs to account for. Yeah. And 9 sacks. I just thought I'd mention Chandler Jones only because of that. But I think Seattle has an opportunity here to take advantage of them on their defensive line. If the protection holds for Seattle, they can really allow Geno Smith to have some time to find his receivers and do some damage, because I don't think their secondary is really that good as well.
I signed Rock Ya-Sin to be kind of the guy to improve the secondary, and he's been hurt and it just hasn't been as good. I like to see Seattle. I mean, I know they love their rookie tackles, and they've put them on an island against some of the best pass rushers in the league already. But you get a guy like Max Crosby, and there's nothing else going for them on their defensive line. This is a team with only 13 sacks total, and 9 of them are Max Crosby. So you've got 3 great tight ends, 2 of which are known for being great blockers, as well as the stuff they do in the passing game. Put one of them next to whichever tackle Max Crosby is deciding to line up against on that play, and even if you just chip him, help out your tackle just a little bit, you can shut down Crosby that way and negate the only thing they've got going for them in terms of their pass rush.
I agree. All right, so they're on their offensive line outside of Colton Miller. The Raiders just don't have any answers up front at all. Right now, there's no one in the starting 5 that ranks in the top half of the players per Pro Football Focus at their position. They do have Josh Jacobs that are in behind that line, and Derek Carr to pass. And Josh Jacobs averages nearly 4 yards a carry after contact, ranks 5th in the NFL. He's a tough back to bring down. He's had a great season running the ball. They've rushed the ball over 100 yards 4 times this year. They've won 3 of those games. Now, 2 of those versus Denver, 1 versus Houston. But nonetheless, they've also been in games. They've given away leads late. They've allowed teams to escape with wins and so forth. So while this team is 3-7, it's not a horrible team. You don't think of the Raiders as being as bad as Houston or as bad as the Cardinals are this season. They're a pretty decent team. They're well coached. Derek Carr can do some damage if he can throw the ball down the field and has time.
I'll push back on the well coached part. I think they are not well coached. I think that Josh McDaniels has struggled and is likely not going to be back as their coach next year.
Yeah, that's possible.
I mean, we were talking about them having leads and being competitive. Yeah, they gave up a 17-point lead and lost that game. But part of it right now is that Adams is hurt but playing. But who in their passing game, you're looking at Hunter Renfro's on injured reserve, Darren Waller's on injured reserve. There's their number 2 and 3 weapons on offense that aren't out there. They are, they're down other than their main running back.
Darren Waller's out too.
Yeah, I said that. I said Waller and Renfro.
Oh, okay.
And so, but I was saying at running back, they've got their starter back. He was hurt for a while, but their numbers 2, 3, and 4 running backs are all out. So they're picking up guys off the street to try and be their backup running back. It's ugly, and their offensive line can't block anyone right now. So their offense is really going to struggle. They're not as good as they were a month ago because of all these injuries.
Yeah, their defense is just not as good, but it's yeah. I mean, the Seahawks have clear advantages across the board on offense. There's just no question. If Seattle plays the way they're capable of playing and up to their league average so far this year, I think they win this game. They've got advantages at wide receiver: Metcalf, Lockett, Goodwin, Eskridge. Those guys are top 25 deep threat, all 3 of them. They're one of the best top 10 teams in converting those to long throws into touchdowns. Lockett is second in the league behind Devontae Adams with 4. Metcalf's tied for 10th and with 2, and then Goodwin has 3. He's tied for 3rd most in the league. Those are going to give those Raider defensive backs serious challenges, and that's not saying anything about our tight ends. Our tight ends have combined for 67 receptions, 736 yards, and 5 touchdowns. They do a horrible job defending tight ends, and so this is a real opportunity for Seattle to be able to take advantage of those matchups as well. And I'm very excited to see what Ken Walker does after a disappointing game against the Buccaneers. How does he bounce back, and really how do they get him involved and get him started in this game so that he can kind of break out and tear off again. So those to me are the matchups that I'm looking for when Seattle has the ball.
This is a game in which Walker should really just go off because Seattle should have a lead. They should be feeding him to try and, milk the clock and all of that. And honestly, defensively, this isn't a team that's been great at stopping the run. So,
yeah.
And with his speed, gets to the second level, he can be gone. So I expect him to have a really big game.
I do too. I mean, this is a bottom 25 defense here that we're facing. We clearly outperform them on almost every statistical category that you can think of on the offensive side against their defense. So I have a feeling that Seattle probably could get close to 30 points in this game, if not higher, if things just really kind of roll, which is entirely possible. And then on the offensive side for the Raiders, they're pretty decent. They're kind of a top 15 offense. They can get some things rolling with their running game. Shelby Harris and Al Woods are going to be instrumental in this game, I think, as far as being able to stop the run. I think Brian Monet is probably going to be a factor. After being out as a healthy scratch in the last game, I bet he's activated in this game because you're going to need the bodies to stop Josh Jacobs. But if we do that, their wide receiver game doesn't bother me. Waller's out at tight end. They don't really have anything behind that. Derek Carr's been a little erratic this year, but when given time, he's able to complete passes. He gets the ball out fairly quick, makes decent decisions. And so I think Seattle really kind of wants to try to make these guys one-dimensional. by stopping the run. And that's hard to do against those guys. But if they can hold them under, say, 70 yards, something in there, make Derek Carr throw the ball, take the lead, force them to throw, force some mistakes, get some turnovers. I think this is another potential double-digit win for Seattle.
Yeah, it really feels like it. And I had higher expectations for the Raiders this year. I thought getting Chandler Jones was going to make a bigger difference for their pass defense. They signed like Rock Ya-Sin on the back end, and I thought they were going to be better, and it just really hasn't worked out. And then now the injuries have hit them, and it's been a rough year for them. And I am just, I don't know. I'm just confused as to how everything went wrong so quickly for a team that actually has talent.
Yeah.
I know they've had some key injuries and some of that. And McDaniels is not, it's really felt like he's just not up to the task of being a head coach. This is his second stint. And they were better last year with in a year in which Gruden got fired and they had interim coach, and it took it took Derek Carr and really to kind of hold the team together and, get them into the playoffs and all of that. That situation somehow is better than now, when they have a supposedly stable head coach and everything, who's supposed to be a great offensive mind too. So I think where, this season kind of went off the rails is their offensive line. They just don't have a good offensive line at all. That's, you take a look at almost the root of all of their problems, and it comes down to protection for Derek Carr, and blocking. And so it takes a potentially top 10 offense with Davante Adams and Josh Jacobs into a middling, probably 15 to 20 overall offense. You combine that with a bottom 5 defense, and it's a recipe for below 500 play, and that's what they're getting. It's a dangerous team. It's a team that can score on you. It's Davante Adams is a weapon. Josh Jacobs, the way that Seattle misses tackles, bottom 5 missed tackle team in the NFL, could potentially be problems for Seattle in this game. So they're going to have to be aware of that, make sure tackles, and try to get stops close to the line of scrimmage. They've struggled with that at times this year, and this is not a back that you want to mess around with and allow him to build up some momentum past the line of scrimmage. So I'm saying that Brandon Monet, Al Woods, Shelby Harris, other run-stuffing, edge-setting players on this team are going to need to step up and have a good game to keep this thing just from being even going into the fourth quarter. If Seattle takes a lead in the fourth quarter by a couple touchdowns, I think they kind of glide to the finish line in this thing. But it's important that we shut that thing down in the first half at least. So the Raider, their running game, you're right. That's the strength of their offense right now. But do you know that they're 23rd in the league in yards per game rushing?
Yeah, that's because they fall behind. They need to pass. You take a look at their passing yards; they're 8th, but they're losing, and so they fall behind. That's the recipe, I think, to win this game, is to do kind of exactly that. Get Josh Jacobs down to where he's only rushing, for 60, 70 yards, and force their passing game to go into effect. They have horrible pass blocking rates. I think they're close to last in the NFL in pass block win rate, and you kind of turn loose on them. And so I think we just need to get there, and it's just a matter of really playing our game. Regardless of opponent, I think Seattle comes out, they play well. Geno Smith has a decent game. He's played decent in almost every game so far this year, as far as pass percentage, completion rate, passer rating. He's top 2 in the NFL. He's second in the NFL in passer rating. He comes out and has his game. Ken Walker goes off. Our receivers and tight ends get into it, and our defense just makes stops, get off the field on third down, and keep the Raiders to 3 points if they get into the red zone. Those are the keys.
Yeah, it becomes at that point, it becomes they just win this going away. So in terms of passing, they're, what was it, 8th in passing yards per game, but they're 14th, just 6.1 yards per attempt as a team. That's not good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in the middle. It's right in average. It's not
sure.
Good. So you look at a combination of where they aren't getting yards rushing and they're not efficient passing. They put a lot of yards because they run a lot of plays.
Wow, and Carr's completion percentage is ranked 24th in the NFL this year. It's like close to 60%.
So I mean, both of those things I think are attributed to the offensive line just being not good. Like they really need to upgrade their offensive line.
Their center is really bad. Andre James still playing on a rookie deal. He stepped back. They thought he was going to improve this year. He just is not. He's a bottom. He's like ranked 30th in the NFL, I think, in pass block win rates, and his rush blocking isn't that much better. Outside of who's their left tackle? Colton Miller, who's on the injured list. He might not even play in this game. And so they've got Jermaine Unor, something like that, like taking over at left tackle. So that's a potential matchup nightmare for them as well. And so I really do think that this game is won or lost in the trenches, and Seattle just is better all around than, outside of Max Crosby. They have better players at every position. And it's just a matter of getting this thing done.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that you look at like Max Crosby's kind of their key to their defense this time. If Max Crosby goes off, has like 2.5 sacks, and is all around Geno all game, Seattle's offense might struggle to do what we expect them to do. But if they put Will Disley over on whatever side, because Crosby moves around. But if they put Will Disley on whatever side Crosby's lining up, and have him just help one of the tackles, even if it's block for a second and then release, Seattle's offense should do fine in this game. Like they really should.
What's the weather supposed to be like up in Seattle this Sunday? Do we know?
No, I actually don't know. So.
Yeah,
I look that up.
That'd be interesting to see because turnovers could be a factor. Anytime a team is desperate, but they can make you sputter a little bit on offense, get to the quarterback, disrupt timing, shut down your run game, force some 3 and outs, then turnovers really become a factor, and weather could play into that.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be terrible. It's light rain. 7-mile-an-hour winds. It's not super windy, not like rainy, no snow, none of that stuff. It should be fine.
Yeah. So what's your prediction, man? Let's wind this thing up. Let's get some predictions out of here and get out of here.
I think Seahawks put one on the Raiders here, and it ends up being like 31-17.
Yeah, that's right in the neighborhood of where I was going to go to. The Raiders have a hard time scoring points. A lot of their games are, where they score 17, 20, 21 points. The Seahawks are scoring 26 points a game against league average defenses. And I think this is a bottom 25 defense. So I think that the Seahawks could end up scoring into the 30s in this game. So I'm going to go a little higher, 34-23, just with a late score for the, it doesn't matter for the Raiders, but it's a 2-score win for the Seahawks, I believe.
Yeah,
which is good news.
That sounds about right.
Get us going again. This is a good game to come back from a bye with, and a good game to respond to a loss against the Raiders. And I think it's going to be a fun game. It's going to be a game that I think Seattle just runs away with, to be completely honest. So anyway, let's get out of here.
Let's do it.
Find Keith on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter. You can find the show. You know where to look. It's on your favorite podcast platforms and YouTube. Just hit the subscribe button if you like it. Share it. And until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWSeahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.